Welcome to Pure Hustle Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and it's time for another Monday mini-sode.
Yeah, threw you off by throwing some extra welcomes in there because, it's Monday mini, and I feel like we've got to bring the heat. We got to
Monday mini motivation.
That's right, because, this is kind of exclusive to our YouTube listeners and watchers because, we have a lot of people who listen to the podcast and not as many views on YouTube, which, it's understandable. People like to listen while they're driving and stuff, but if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to get bonus content here with Monday Mini. So we're super excited today to be talking about 5 time wasters that cause you to lose money. So 5 things.
Sounds so exciting.
Well, because it's common things that people do. And, like you mentioned, almost in some ways, like this is motivational in the sense of what are ways that we can, because most of these things we know, like intuitively we know a lot of these things, but yet we still end up falling into them, right? Like we can make these same mistakes over and over and over. And like a wise man once said, usually you don't have to learn new things as much as you just have to be reminded of things you already know. And so in this episode, we're going to be talking about 5 ways that you're wasting time and money is being lost because of it.
All right. So starting off the bat, if you're not planning your sourcing, you're probably wasting a lot of time, right? And this can go various ways, right? The easiest one is, let's say you go to garage sales for eBay. You don't plan your route the night before. You kind of like, you're driving and you stop and you're like, oh, I'll go to this one, or I'll go, this one looks good.
Next thing you know, you're backtracking miles.
You end up at the same garage sale sometimes.
That's happened. Yeah.
You spend hours looking for stuff. You show up late to things. You don't know what inventory is there. Like just poor planning. Or when you're sourcing, right? You end up, you should have stores on a rotation basis as far as thrift stores when you source, because if you're just going willy-nilly whenever, you want to go, you may miss when they restock. You may miss on the sale days. You may miss, the opportunities to get to know employees because if you go at the same time, most likely the schedules are going to be the same with those employees there. So you get to know people. So you don't want to, you can waste garage sales, man. I remember back in the day before I planned them, and I would just go like, oh, I'm going to just go to a couple. And then if I see some along the way, I'll stop.
You just drive and stop. But if you're just kind of on a hunt, which again, some of my best finds have come from, en route.
You can't go against the podcast.
Well, but I'm saying like you could be en route and see a sign. That's one thing. But if your goal is just, I'm just going to randomly drive around, that's probably not the effective goal. And the same thing you mentioned a couple of podcasts ago about, offer up, having a specific day if possible, and then planning a route out ahead of time, because there are certain times that I know I can pick up in certain locations because it's on my way home from work. And it's always going to be, about 4:30 to 5 that I'm going to be able to be at, this area of town. And so by setting it up so I can make sure that I'm not backtracking, I'm hitting the right places at the right time. Because there have been times where, I drive out and I get something, I drive back home, and then the next one's not available until later that day. And so I have to drive back out and then come back home. And then another one, I got to drive back out. And so sometimes that is the way it is. But if you can help it, you can maybe try and it can be tough, but, work out a time where it's like, I'm going to be in town between 4 to 6. Does that time work for you? Right. And then if that works, then you can hit up 3-4 places in one trip instead of making 3 separate trips.
Yeah, agreed. So the next one here, okay, it's the whole idea of having a flow to your listing. So let me explain this a little bit. It's very easy when you first start eBay, like you pick up 3 or 4 items and they just sit around and you're like, oh, I'm going to list that eventually. Right. And it's no big deal because you just started. But then eventually you have about 30 items that you haven't listed. Then it gets to 50, then 60. Right. And then it's all kinds of different items. You have shoes and you have video games and you have toys and you have shirts. And then you have no flow to it. So what I mean by flow is, getting all your shoes together, getting all the shirts together, getting all the toys together, like doing all those listings at the same time, right? Bunching them together and then having a flow. How's it going to work? Okay. Are you going to first take pictures or are you going to first work on your listing, right? You got to figure that out. Do you have an idea of what your shipping is going to be for all of these items? Do you have, listings? Are you doing similar for everything? Or are you just starting from scratch? Like you have to have some kind of flow.
Yeah. I love, and I mentioned it a million times in the podcast, maybe we need to do a reaction video and just talk about it, showing that part of the video. But I think it was The Founders is the name of the movie, that kind of movie that was based on the McDonald's and where it came from.
Oh,
and
the
one of the founders, one of the best scenes in that movie is when they're out in a parking lot and they're literally with like chalk on the ground marking like, what if the oven's here and the pickup windows here, and they're like trying different things, and they have people at stations and they're like, all right, switch. Okay, now get the and they're trying to see like how much time does it take to go from this station to this station? All right, what if we move this station closer? Oh, now these two people are hitting each other. And just to think they probably spent hours and hours and hours just figuring out the right flow. But once they had it, they saved millions of hours over the course of a few years of employees not running into each other because they move things in the right direction. And so the same thing works with your workspace when it comes to listing. Do you have a consistent flow of like taking the pictures all at one time, similar items, so you're not, now I got to set up this photo booth and then, oh, this doesn't fit in the photo box. Like if I've got big items that don't fit in photo boxes, I put them to the side and then I'll pick a specific day. Like this day, these are all items that don't fit in my photo box. I have to figure out a different way. That way I'm not like in the middle in a flow of taking pictures in my photo box. It's like, oh, now I'm going to do this big item, right? And again, if you've only got a few items, there's nothing you can do about that. But when you've got a death pile of 100 things, you can kind of organize. I'm going to do these 30 today because they're all somewhat similar. It'll be easy to take these pictures or to do these listings. So, and even things like, this is a little flow thing that's worked for me because I do my listings after I do my pictures. When I'm doing my pictures, I have a notepad and I write down certain things on the notepad about that item, things I want to make sure I put in the listing, maybe size, maybe I write down, if there's flaws, certain things like, doesn't come with this. And then I take a picture of that next to the item. So that way, when I'm doing my listings, I pull up my pictures. I don't post that picture, but I have it to go back to, and I know exactly which item. And then I even put on there what tote I put it into when I organize, which goes into our next thing, organizing inventory.
Oh, this is, if there's like a ranking, I would say this is number one for me. When your inventory gets to a certain size, I would say like 100 on eBay or Poshmark or Mercari, whatever platform you're using, you gotta be organized. You will lose so much time. I'll never forget. Not that I'll never forget. This happened to me the other day. It's the worst feeling in the world when something sells and I go to my custom SKU label on eBay, which is that it's on your listing that you can use to tell it, where this item is. Is it in closet 1, closet 2? Is it in tote B9 or wherever it is? And the other day, I sold a pair of shoes and the custom SKU label wasn't there.
Oof.
And when you have an inventory my size, that's a problem. So I have about 45 totes of shoes. Guess what I did? I think I found it by tote 37. Think about how much time that was. I think it was about 50 minutes. Because not only that, I also have them, wrapped in some plastic. So I have to I have to pull it up and make sure, I'm not missing the shoe. Yep. And man, the time I have lost doing those kind of things. Clothing. There was a time where, I just threw all my Hawaiian shirts like in 4 different totes. Okay, you sell one Hawaiian shirt. It may be in one of the 4 totes, but what if you have 100 shirts in a tote?
Yep.
You got to take all those out and then it's not there. Like, oh, put them all back in. And then you get to the 4th tote and it's not in there still.
You got to start over.
So then you're like, maybe I missed it. Oh, it's the worst.
Yeah. So, and it's tough. It's tough, especially as you scale, because then you got to constantly reorganize. But even if you're custom skewing things and you get a new organization system, sometimes what we've done in the past is these 100 items, that was our old inventory system. Those totes go in a special place. They're marked differently, right? Like they don't follow our normal thing. And so, that it's not going to be an A1 tote or a B3 tote, and it's not going to be in bag 4 inside of B3. If it's got a different thing, it's like, I'm not going to go through all my old stuff and put it into my new inventory. I've got 5 totes that are just labeled differently, and I know those are the old stuff. And so you kind of, sometimes you have to scale and figure things out. And sometimes you do have to reorganize everything. And other times you can go, oh, that was old. That's the old system. So my old system stuff gets stored over here. So maybe it's not the most efficient use of space, but time wise, I'm not going to put this all in the new tote system the way I have it. So you've got to figure something out though. And the earlier you start to develop a system, like plan to
like 5 items, just get started.
Plan to start organizing early, right? Because I used to be into fish, like breeding fish. I think I've mentioned that on the podcast before.
What hasn't Mike been into?
And there was something they called multi-tank syndrome. And it was the idea of like, once you started getting into fish, like you are going to have 10 fish tanks. And sure enough, before long, I was breeding fish. I had 10, 15 fish tanks. And so we have the multi-tote syndrome. Like if you have one tote of stuff, chances are you're going to have more totes of stuff. So you might as well start figuring out the organization system now.
Agreed. All right. Next, having supplies available. And this, especially during Q4. Sorry, I thought we gotta go voicemail.
Oh, nice.
But it's a contest. We wanted to play it on our mini-sode here, but we're not going to. So, all right. Sorry about that. Supplies. Listen, the worst is during Q4. You pick up all of these items, right? And then they sell right away. But you don't have the boxes for those items. So then you're like, oh no, what do I do? Oh, I better go to Walmart, or I'm going to go to, maybe U-Haul if they're open. And then you go and those boxes aren't available. So then you spend another hour and then you don't find them. Sometimes you may spend an hour and a half. I can't tell you how many times, like, especially when I'm traveling and sourcing, or I'm trying to do merchant fulfilled while I'm on the road, or I'm trying to do FBA or something, and I forget a supply, like I forget my tape, or I forget my scale, forget something. The time I waste trying to find that item, right? So this is why we're big with one of our sponsors, AmericanBubbleBoy.com. You can use our promo code PROSPodcast, all lowercase, is that always have that bubble wrap at hand, because especially when it gets to Q4 and you start selling stuff, like you're going to lose a lot of time if you run out of bubble wrap. And then our Walmarts are notorious for being out of stock. Like, I don't know if it's just me, but every time I try to, you know, on a pinch, try to get some bubble wrap, there's nothing there.
Yeah, you don't want to be in that situation for sure. And you might even need to schedule that into your time when it comes to ordering supplies and things. And that kind of goes to our last point, which is you got to schedule your time, especially if you're going full time, even part time. If you're just doing it for a fun hobby, doesn't matter so much. But if you're going full time, or you want to do this seriously part time, you need to have some kind of organization in your structure. You need to know, what days of the week do I source? What days of the week do I take pictures? Maybe you do all three every day. Maybe it's I list in the morning, I source in the afternoon, and I plan my next day, or I ship when I get home in the afternoon, in the evening. Okay. You need to have something consistent, because if you're inconsistent with your time, part of it is just like, it's always, your mind's going to go 100 places. Once you write things out and like, today, here's what I'm doing. Maybe you're doing it every day like that. Or maybe this week, I need to hit up these 4 stores. I need to ship these things. I need to pick up supplies, and plan your time out, right? Like good companies, good employees at companies, you kind of have to do this. You have a schedule, you have things you have to do at a certain time. And when you don't treat your business like a business, and you kind of are just like, I'm just going to sleep in today, I'll get to it tonight. Oh, something came up tonight, I'll do it tomorrow. And the next thing you know, you've wasted so much time. But if you're like, you know what? I take pictures in the morning. I wake up, have my coffee, I take 10 pictures. And you have that kind of consistency, you organize that time, you will see exponential growth.
And I argue that if it's not specific, you will waste time. So, I was looking behind you at our bookcase, and we have the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And he talks about, like, if you say this is going to take 2 hours, it'll take 2 hours. If you say it's going to take 4 hours, it'll take you 4 hours. Right. And I find that so much to be the case with reselling, where I'm like, hey, I'm just going to list 10 items. Okay, how long is that going to take? Is it going to take 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours? But if you're like, hey, I'm going to list these 10 items in 1 hour, chances are you're going to get it done, right? I am so guilty of that, where I won't give myself a time frame. I'm just going to go, hey, tonight, I'm going to make sure I get these listed. And then before you know it, I didn't meet my mark. So you don't want to waste that time. You want to be specific about your times when you do stuff, when you go sourcing, when you list, when you ship, all that stuff, so you can be more organized. And then you don't experience burnout, right? Because instead of wasting that time and feeling like you lost because you spent all this time not getting stuff done, you got it done, you got it completed in an ample amount of time, and now you can go spend time doing what you really wanted to do.
Yeah.
So with that being said, hopefully that was helpful to you. Make sure that you're not losing time by not planning your sourcing, not listing your flow, putting a flow to your listing.
Yeah.
Being efficient, being organized, having your inventory organized, having all your supplies, and make sure to schedule your times. And as always, be real,
be relevant,
and be reselling. Late.
Peace.